streaming, we are good to go.
Excellent. We are now down to agenda item 10E. This is the consideration and adoption of ordinance number 2021-06, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Flagstaff, amending the Flagstaff zoning map to rezone approximately 11 acres of real property generally located at 151 West High Country Trail, APNs 112-05-001W and 112-05-011 from the estate residential zone to the medium density residential zone, with conditions providing for severability, authority for clerical corrections, and establishing an effective date. All right, Ms. Putrelli, take us away.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. My name is Alexandra Putrelli. I'm the current planning manager. I just wanted to give you a brief presentation on this project and kind of remind you of some highlights and go over some current changes that we've seen. Next. So as you recall, this project currently exists of 2 parcels, approximately 11 acres, and it is zoned ER, that's estate residential, with a resource protection overlay. The proposal is to rezone them to medium density residential, and one of the requirements is that these parcels be combined to one single parcel. Next. The proposed changes per the DA. These are the most recent changes that we've seen. One is the inclusion of 3 pickleball courts in the required civic space up near the road. These will be publicly accessible, so people could come and park on site and utilize those courts. The developer has agreed to limit rentals so that there could be no short-term rentals at this location. And then the energy efficiency, in order to achieve the sustainability bonus, they're required to meet the HERS 50 standard. But staff has also asked for 100% or all the residential units to be electric, all electric buildings. There are challenges with meeting both those standards. So we've come up with some alternatives that the developer proposed that staff has agreed to. Those would be the all electric buildings for the residential buildings, achieving the green building standard, bronze level, and whole building energy simulation showing a minimum of 15% improvement over the current energy code. Next. The northern portion of the parcel, there are 2 acres on the opposite side of High Country Trail. There was discussion at our last meeting about this area moving the fence so that a portion of that could be accessed by the public. That is not going to happen. The area will remain fenced. It will be the private use of the Auza family, who is my understanding that they are the ones who are not allowing the fence to be relocated. And this area is being used to calculate density of the project, as well as to meet the required tree resource protection. Next. We could look at the proposed density of the site. The entire site is 11 acres, resulting in 99 units. They are using 2 different bonus densities, including the affordable housing unit, as well as the sustainability bonus. It allows them to then have 169 allowed units. This proposal is for 160 units, and 20 of those will be affordable units. Next. So staff recommended that the Planning and Zoning Commission forward the request to City Council with a recommendation of approval in accordance with the findings and subject to the following conditions. I won't read through all the conditions for you. Next. The Planning and Zoning Commission disagreed with staff's recommendation, and instead they voted to recommend that City Council, in accordance with the findings, deny the request for a direct-to-ordinance zoning map amendment for Aura Flagstaff. So that's the conclusion of kind of my update proposal. I know the applicant is here as well, if you have any questions for them or questions for staff.
Thank you, Ms. Pucciarelli. Councilmember Aslan has a question.
Thank you. Ms. Pucciarelli, can you go back to slide number 4?
Yes. It's coming.
I think it's 4.
4 had the map of the area to the north.
Yeah, so I just want to ask you directly, do you think it's fair to characterize what the landowner is doing is they're selling the land but demanding to maintain control of it?
I think it's certainly unique. I don't have all the details of the agreement, the sales agreement between the current property owner and the developer. This may be a better question for the developer to understand what sort of conditions are being placed on the sale of that property, that you could buy property but be restricted in what you could do on that property.
Well, we can certainly extend this question over to them as well. It seems to me that we have property owners who are selling land, but insisting that they maintain control over it. And I'd like to have that fleshed out a little bit more.
Yeah, if the applicant would like to get on, happy to have them respond to that.
Mayor and Council, Jason Morris, Withy Morris on behalf of the applicant. Good afternoon, and thank you for another opportunity to discuss this case. But I have to tell you, it is a unique situation, but as we're talking about the parcel, it's not a situation of the sellers or the developers making. It happens to be that this particular parcel, which predates the city of Flagstaff in terms of its creation, was divided by a roadway that was essential to the city of Flagstaff and the creation of High Country Trail. So although there is a portion of it that is orphaned, my client is in fact purchasing the entire parcel. But development, as you can see, is focused on the southern portion of that parcel. I can tell you from a land development standpoint, and this hopefully will address Councilmember Aslan's question, it is not unfair, because in terms of use, if this were a typical development, that portion of the property on the other side of High Country Trail would be developed. And if that portion were developed, it wouldn't be available to the public. It would be units, it would be housing, it would be some other form of development. But this is not unlike purchasing any other property in the city of Flagstaff and choosing only to develop a portion of it and restrict the development or the access to the rest. But I have a presentation that I'm happy to go through that will go into a little bit more detail as to some of the concerns on that, Mayor. It's just a matter of if you'd like me to make my presentation at this time, or if there are any other questions from the council or yourself.
Well, Councilmember Aslan, would you like to respond or clarify or anything regarding this particular point?
No, I'll wait. I'd like to hear from other council members, and if there's a presentation still coming, I can appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, well, I'll give it an opportunity here, Council, if you have any questions right now, or Yeah, I'd be happy to have you do a short presentation to better explain it. I think that's important for not just us council, but the public to understand. Yeah, if we could please not have it go too long, I'd appreciate it. I'm not seeing any other comments or remarks in the chat box. So if you'd like to present, Mr. Morris, you're welcome to.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. I will make a brief presentation, and this presentation really is just a matter of updating us since our previous hearing in April. The previous hearing in April really concluded with a suggestion from council, and we'd like to address that suggestion and explain where we've gone since that time. If you'll give us just a moment to share that screen. Thank you very much. As you're aware, this is the site in question. We've superimposed the actual site plan on there so that the council, you and the council, can get a sense of how this interacts. You can see from this site, we're obviously west of the intersection of the arterial and High Country Trail. So you have Lake Marion High Country Trail. And then we are between two existing multifamily projects, the Lodge and Timber Trails, and adjacent to the Ponderosa Pines community as well. In terms of access, we have immediate access to the collector road that takes you out to Lake Mary, which in fact is access to I-17 as well. So in terms of housing, it's well situated. As we go to the next slide, this will give a sense, Mayor and Council, of that split parcel. But again, we are not dependent upon that portion on the north side of High Country Trail, and I can't emphasize this enough. We're not dependent upon that portion for any of our open space or requirements in order to allow the development of the southern portion, the larger 9-acre piece on the other side of High Country Trail. And I want to say that because I think there may have been at least some thought process that we were relying upon that area for open space, either common or civic open space. But I want to assure the Mayor and Council that in fact all of our common and civic open space is met and actually exceeded just by virtue of the 9-acre parcel that we are developing. Although I can assure you equally that the portion on the far side of High Country Trail will never be developed and is under a conservation easement and is part of our development agreement. So that property will remain not only unscathed, but also it will remain undeveloped. Next slide. Just to give you a sense of where we stand, to give the developer a little bit of understanding in terms of what they have undergone in order to develop this parcel and what it has transformed from. Originally, we were talking about a larger acreage and utilizing some of the property on the far side of High Country Trail, or at least utilizing that property for the benefit of 197 units, so somewhat of a density transfer. As we worked with staff back in 2018 and moved forward ultimately through December of 2018. So that entire year, it was really a function of site planning and dropping that acreage to make sure that we were not reliant upon that other acreage and dropped to 16 acres, still utilizing some of the Auza property on the north side of High Country Trail, but utilizing that for 173 units. Ultimately, as time proceeded, Mayor, we went forward with a site plan that ultimately got the support of staff in January of 2020, but that required reducing the density, utilizing even less acreage on the other side of High Country Trail. In fact, relying only upon that single parcel that we are utilizing now as part of that 11 acres. So the density was reduced, the area was reduced, there was a 25% bedroom decrease. We tripled the setbacks to the single family. We increased the affordable housing, increased the open space, decreased the total number of buildings, and reduced the disturbance to any of the terrain. We also agreed at that point to participate in the sustainable building program as well as the crime-free multi-housing. With that site plan and with staff support, we moved forward. Ultimately, last year, made some additional changes to increase open space yet again. Also agreed to extend the Foots Trail and connect the two missing parts of that Foots Trail along High Country Trail, as well as the bus stops. So as we move forward now, 2.5 years, 3 years into this process, we are making changes yet again in response to our April 6th hearing. And I'd like to share those changes with you. So as you'll recall, and as staff pointed out, there was a suggestion at the April 6th council meeting that because there was property that was not developed but is being purchased and is part of this development and is part of the parcel, that in fairness, there is a corresponding community benefit that was necessary. And in order to justify that, there was a suggestion from council that the fence line be moved from where it is along High Country Trail to essentially that yellow line within the Auza property. And we, of course, took that to the Auzas. As you're aware, they've controlled that land since before statehood. That is a homestead property, and they are both in their 80s who live on that property. And they were very reticent to make that change. And it wasn't about what that does for the community, but the concern of what that does to the property itself. And I'll go into a little bit more detail there because I think it warrants mentioning. That
Mr. Morris, Mr. Morris, sorry to cut you off. I just want you to be aware, we do have 8 public commentators that are waiting on the line as well to give their public comments. So I appreciate the review, but if we could, get to it, I'd appreciate it.
I apologize, and I don't want to delay this any further, Mayor, but I did not hear your comment. You were cutting out there.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying
it was hurry up.
A little bit. Yeah, we have 8 commentators from the public on the line, so they're waiting to speak as well. I just wanted to, hurry it up a little bit. I'd appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. I will be very brief. I think I only have 2 more slides or 3 more slides. The concern with the proposal, Mayor, was that property would be unimproved, yet open to the public. And because of it being situated adjacent to a collector with no parking available for it, and also no lighting, no security, that it would posed a security risk not only for the public, but for the developer who would ultimately be responsible for that property long term, and the Auza family who live adjacent to that fence line. It would not include any kind of safety feature, and unlike public lands that are open, this would be privately maintained and privately accountable. So there was reticence both on the developer's part and the Auza's part as to the viability of making this property. But we also understood that it was the council's desire to see a corresponding public benefit. And we looked into that, and you'll see, again, if you'll bear with me, this next slide, in talking about a public benefit, we reached out to your Parks and Recreation Director to find out where the demand is for parks and recreation and open space, if that was something that we were able to create. And we were told that pickleball courts are in tremendous demand and something that the Parks and Recreation Department is trying to keep up with. But as they looked at opportunities, they didn't want to take away from other aspects of parks, and they wanted to make sure there was parking available. So as a result of that, and to cut to the chase, Mayor and Council, the developer has agreed to create a total of 4 public pickleball courts and parking with associated open space adjacent to High Country Trail. So there will be access to those pickleball courts. They will be built and maintained at the developer's cost, and there will be parking associated with that as part of our public benefit, although it is not required. In terms of what that does, and I've already mentioned this so we can skip over, but I want to assure you, we are not deficient in any open space. And that is, with the fence line in place, we are still exceeding both the civic and the common open space for a project of this size. And lastly, Mayor, I'll leave you and the council with this. In terms of the development that we are requesting, and we've talked about all the benefits, but it's worth putting a price tag on those benefits because this type of benefit is only available for this type of development. If this in fact turned to single family residential, the community would not get the 20 units of permanent affordable housing, which have a $5 million value. They would not get the completion of the Foots Trail. They would not get the pickleball courts. They would not have the benefit of dictating the green building standard and the all electric buildings, which are a cost of $10,000 per unit. The electric vehicle charging stations, the construction of the new bus stops, and the preservation of the tree resources and the conservation easement, all of which is a $7 million public benefit as a part of the virtues of this development, Mayor. So with that, I will leave you with these summary of changes, and I'd be happy to answer any questions and would hope that you would support your staff and ultimately support and approve this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morse, for the added information. I did want to, before we go to more comments and questions from the council and our own discussion, open it up for public commentary. So if we have those on the line, happy to take them. Ms. Moore.
Mayor, we have Phil Goldblatt. Phil, could you please go ahead?
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I'm Phil Goldblatt, and I've lived in Ponderosa Trails for 12 years. I have nothing against this developer and how or what they build, which is high-density apartments, but they should find another parcel to develop that is more appropriate to high density. This one is not. Now, I have a legal challenge to this project in that, in my estimation, it fails to meet all 3 of the findings required by our zoning code. And I ask you all to refer to an attachment that I sent you previously labeled legal challenge to the Aura project. Finding number 1 is not met because it is inconsistent with our regional plan. This parcel is designated medium density residential, not high density. This is not optional according to Arizona state law. It's also inconsistent with community character preservation policies 3.1, 3.2, 4.6, and land use policy 3.4. Also with regard to renewable energy policies 2.1, 2.2, and 2.4. Now, finding number 2 is not met because this project is using unconstitutional guidelines to allow disregard of the plan's suburban characteristic density range. The plan interpretation on this is legally arbitrary and overbroad and therefore unconstitutional. The applicant also proposes development on a part of the site upon which it is unlawful to develop because it is kept private. Finding number 3 is not met because zoning code violations occur as a direct result of over-concentrating density. There are no primary entrances on the apartment buildings that face a street, pedestrian way, or building entry zone. There is no screen wall to screen this development from High Country Trail, and there are parking spaces that also are not screened from the view of High Country Trail, a public way. Furthermore, the secondary entrances do not face any building entry zone either. This is why this development is so aesthetically objectionable. I thank you for hearing me out, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Goldblatt. Council, do we have any questions of Mr. Goldblatt before we move on to the next caller? I'm not seeing any in the chat box right now, so yeah, we're on to the next individual.
Mayor, I have Ms. Ray Jones on the line. Ray, go ahead.
All right, hello. As you prepare to cast your votes on this development, I hope you have all really thought through about this project and the impact it has on the community. It's not just a small plot of land topography being impacted. It's not just the homeowners whose homes directly back up to this land that are being impacted. It's not just the neighborhood of Ponderosa Trails that's being impacted. This proposed development stands for a larger impact of how this council will uphold the law and what is right, not just for a few in Flagstaff, but for all. At the last meeting, I know many of you in the council were very focused and excited about the 20 affordable units this complex is proposing. I am aware of the need for more housing in Flagstaff, from low income all the way up to single family homes if they're needed. However, I hope that those 20 units would not be the sole point of your decision. Again, this complex is not in compliance with the zoning code, and the affordable units should not constitute breaking those laws. I supported Councilmember McCarthy's proposal at the last City Council meeting that Aura attended. If the developer claims the 2 acres on the other side of the street, they should not be privately fenced for the Auza family. If they want to keep that land privately fenced, as we all are aware that they're going to do, then the developer should not buy that land, or not claim that land or the trees in the density calculations. It was disappointing to see when, after the multiple meetings that this project has been delayed, there still have not been changes made to this project. The developer has shared how they have been within and working toward this project for 38 plus months, and how that they feel that shows their commitment to the community. I feel that really shows all the controversy, uncertainty, and questions that planning and zoning and now this council have had on this project. If this project was really the right project for this space, was really medium density, I would suspect it would never have taken to get this long through the system. Thank you for your time, and I hope you vote no.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Any questions of the caller, Council? I'm not seeing any in the chat box, so thank you, Ms. Jones. And next public commentator.
Nathan, you can go ahead and speak now.
Okay, perfect. Mayor, DC, and members of City Council, thank you for taking the time to let me speak this evening. The last time this developer was before you, on April 1st, they left the meeting confident in their ability to move the fence on the north side of High Country Trail. I had an opportunity to see the revised DA provided by the developer last Friday, and as I sat down to read it, I was hopeful that the developer did the right thing and either moved the fence on the north side of High Country or decreased the number of units to 133 to truly be medium density to meet the ask made by the City Council at the last meeting that they attended. But much to my dismay, they didn't, and instead they added another pickleball court and updated the sustainability requirements for all electric. At the meeting on April 1st, there was some discussion amongst you around the P&Z meeting and verdict and how the verdict was difficult for them to come to. But I ask you, if this project was valid and met all of the findings in the zoning code, why did they unanimously vote no? Given our housing shortage, I would assume if this development was legitimate and met the zoning code, P&Z would have voted yes. While I'm aware that Flagstaff is in a housing shortage, that shouldn't prevent you from upholding your duties to represent all the people of Flagstaff and the laws of the city code. Just because we need more housing isn't an excuse to turn a blind eye to the faults of this proposal. I want to leave you today with a couple of questions, one of which I proposed to you in one of the last emails that I sent to you, since I've sent you quite a few emails. But why do we have a zoning code if it's not going to be upheld? And are you going to do what's moral to protect the general welfare? Both moral and protect and general welfare all come from the mission statement for the city. Are you going to do what's moral to protect the general welfare of Flagstaff and vote no on this project, or are you going to look past the glaring issues with this development and vote yes, just to add a few units of affordable housing. I hope you do what's right and just and vote no on this rezone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Council, do we have any questions? All right, on to the next public commentator. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have Ms. Sue Borst on the line. Sue, go ahead.
Oh, hello. Good evening, Mayor DC and council members. Thank you for allowing me to express my opinion concerning the rezoning of the 11 acres adjacent to Ponderosa Trails. I am a homeowner in the Ponderosa Trails neighborhood. I am opposed to the rezoning, and I'm opposed for the extremely simple reason that I bought my home with the belief that Ponderosa Trails and also the 11 acres under current consideration was zoned R1 and would remain zoned R1. It is unjust and very simply morally wrong to change the zoning to accommodate an out-of-state contractor while sacrificing our single home neighborhood. And again, to allow 160 apartment units to be built in this area would be counter to what this neighborhood was originally built to be, a single resident neighborhood. There have been many responses to surveys, mail delivered to each of your offices, and petitions in support of not changing the existing zoning. I respectfully ask you, Mayor DC and council members, to vote no and agree with the Planning and Zoning Commission to deny this zoning change. Please do not vote for an out-of-state developer they are not interested in the damage their development will have on our neighborhood, but only interested in their profits for exploiting the Ponderosa Trails neighborhood. And thank you for the previous callers. You've made such good points. I appreciate everything that everyone is doing to prevent this zoning change. And thank you very much for your time and consideration. Have a good evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ms. Borst. Any questions, council? All right, next public commentator.
Ms. Michelle James, please go ahead.
Hello, and thank you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. My name is Michelle James. I'm the Executive Director of Friends of Flagstaff's Future. FCube is supportive of the affordable housing and sustainability goals featured in the proposed Aura apartment complex. We recognize that 1 and 2 bedroom apartments are very much needed in Flagstaff, and the 20 affordable units proposed for this project would assist us in addressing our affordable housing emergency. We also know that many of the undeveloped lands remaining in Flagstaff are still vacant because of the complexities of building on sites with steep slopes and encumbrances like the power lines we see here. But we are concerned with the long-term consequences for future rezonings of approving what is in actuality a high-density development built on property that would be rezoned as medium density. The subject parcel has multiple constraints, including bisection of the property by both a road and electrical transmission lines. According to the November 2020 staff report, the effect of these constraints is a concentration of building density on the southern portion of the parcel, resulting in a perceived experience of 17.8 units per acre if 160 units are built on the southern 9 acres. The end result is that the developer is proposing to build what is essentially a high-density apartment complex in designated existing suburban outside of an activity center. This is not in line with our regional plan. The subject parcel and the parcels to the north and west of the northern portion of the subject parcel are all owned by Alza Flagstaff, LLC. The 2 acres, more or less, of the subject parcel on the north side of High Country Trail have an existing home that appears to be primarily located and accessed on the parcel to the north. While the subject parcel changes hands, when the subject parcel changes hands to the Aura development, this house will be encroaching along with the fenced-in 2 acres being currently used by the house and will be inaccessible to future apartment dwellers. We understand from staff that Alza Flagstaff LLC will encumber the land with an easement that could potentially cover the entire 2 acres. What is happening here is a de facto split of the subject parcel into a private residence and an apartment complex. Because it is on paper as one parcel, the total acreage allows the owner and the developer to justify the higher number of units that they want to build. even though it would be more appropriate to combine this residential portion of the land with the land to its north. FCube strongly encourages City Council to think carefully about the decision to rezone those parcels with the current proposal. We believe that the spirit of the Flagstaff Regional Plan must be followed. Either the developer goes through the process for a regional plan amendment, or they should only build what 9 acres would allow. If council would like for there to be what is essentially a new policy that allows high-density development in existing suburban areas zoned as medium density when affordable housing and or sustainable measures are included, then a regional plan amendment process should be started and the resultant community conversation should be allowed to take place. Thank you for considering our comments.
Thank you, Ms. James. Councilmember Shimoni has a question for you, Ms. James, if you're still on there.
Yes,
Councilmember Shimoni.
Hi, Ms. James. Thank you for your comment today. So, I'm just curious, we've declared a housing emergency and a climate emergency, and obviously FCube, I believe, supports and embraces both of those values that the community and the city passed. There's 208 individuals who would be benefiting from this project in this infill along a highly traveled corridor. Are you saying that you think we should not support this project?
What I'm saying is that the proposal should go through a regional plan amendment process. And my understanding from talking to staff is that the developer kind of knew that was what they needed to do, and they chose not to do it, and instead add a couple acres on the other side of the road. We are totally supportive of affordable housing, and making this decision has been difficult about where we stand because of those 20 units. However, I don't think setting precedent here in terms of not following the regional plan is a good thing to do. I don't think we should set that precedent. I think there should be a community conversation about whether we want to change what's in the regional plan to allow for affordable housing at high densities in areas where we haven't talked about meeting those yet.
So a quick follow-up, knowing that if we push this developer to get a regional plan adjustment, we might kill the project. Do you think we should go in that direction?
Well, I think that's really a decision for you guys. I would be disappointed if it fell through. I think what FCube is saying here is that it needs to, the density for the new units going in for the apartment complex really needs to be based on 9 acres, not 11 acres. And my understanding of those numbers is it's about 23, depending on how you do the math, about 23 less units. So I would hope that would not kill the project and that the developer could continue to build it just based on the density on the 9 acres instead of the 11.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public commenters, or is that the end?
Mayor, that was the last one.
All right. Well, then I'd like to open it up for general questions and comments of council. I do see Councilmember McCarthy is ready to make a motion at the appropriate time, but I'll open it up for discussion here first, if applicable. All right, Councilmember McCarthy.
I'll make a couple.
My apologies. Councilmember Shimoni just put a C in the chat box, so if you'd like to comment.
Let Mr. Shimoni go first. That's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember McCarthy. I was hoping other colleagues were going to comment before we jump to a motion, but I'll go ahead and just say my piece. I know we've had a lot of discussion on this topic, and it's been a long time coming. Again, 3 years in the making. So bear with me. I have a couple points I just want to read through in my comments here, and I'll try to make it as short as I can, Mayor. We have declared a housing emergency, and residential housing wouldn't provide half as much of a public benefit, nor is it infill on this parcel. We've heard that this project needs to find a more appropriate location for this type of an infill project. And to my colleagues on council, especially the newer members, we're going to hear this on every rezone of a project similar in size. And this is not going to be anything new to us as we move forward. Yes, this project is unique and different, but there's going to be pushback from every neighborhood of which we see infill projects like these. I challenge all those who are speaking out against the project to look at their own homes and ask themselves if their land that they have a house on is serving the greater community as much as a project like this would. I think often the answer is going to be no. So the city mission was invoked in one of the public comments to protect and enhance the quality of life for all. Council, are we protecting and enhancing the quality of life for all? Well, we know that we have thousands on a waiting list for affordable housing by saying no to this development. Someone asked if we are going to do what is moral for the community. Well, council, I guess we'll find out in a few minutes here. But here's what we do know. We have thousands on that waiting list for affordable housing in Flagstaff, as we know about. The city has declared an emergency when it comes to affordable, and that we need 1 and 2 bedrooms so desperately in our community. We have an obligation to this community to fight for affordable housing and for housing. This is not going to be easy, and it's going to take a lot of strong political will to overcome the pushback and the NIMBYism that is so strong and prevalent in Flagstaff today. This project is it builds vertically, respectfully, and it is 1 and 2 bedrooms. I mean, with 20% affordable. I don't understand what the hang-up is. I do get the complications with the 2-acre parcel, and if there was a way for the developer to lessen the number of units to work and meet that common ground solution that we want to find, council, I'm supportive of that. But if that's going to kill the project, I'd like to see this project be built with the infill that is being presented. Is this request unique? Yes, it is. Is it legal? Yes, it is. This is not an illegal ask by the zoning adjustment. If we don't approve this request, the project is likely not going to come back to us. And that's going to be 208 individuals that won't have a place to call home that could have. Okay, 208. I want you to imagine 208 people you're saying no to because you don't like that the 2 acres is fenced off. I've heard that this is an out-of-state developer and that therefore we shouldn't be supportive of this project. My question is to anyone saying or thinking that, who are the folks that are going to be living here? Councilmember McCarthy, you've helped to shape the fact that there's not going to be short-term rentals in this project. Council, we helped to shape that this is not going to be another student housing project. These are going to be locals living here. This is a local project, infill, workforce development, something we need. In closing, Mayor and Council, I'd like to see us support this project today and find a way to make this work for the developer and the community. And I will be extremely disappointed personally if we let this thing fall through and fall short of being a success for our community that so desperately deserves and needs affordable housing today. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for allowing me the time to share those thoughts.
Thank you, Councilmember Shimoni. Well articulated. Councilmember Aslan.
Thank you. Yeah, I suppose I should get on the record with my thoughts and comments here before we go to a final, before we start the motion process. And I've already spoken at length on the record about this matter before, so I'll go ahead and try to keep my comments brief. I am not likely to be supporting this rezone. While the applicant may be taking advantage of a legal loophole in order for the fuzzy math of this development to work, it's my opinion that the applicant should have avoided the temptation to act upon this loophole in bad faith. While legal, this funny math wreaks havoc on a reasonable person's sense of what medium density housing looks like, and in this context where it's appropriate. You know, I think this is an appropriate area for infill development. That comment will most likely be ignored as it has in the past, so I don't want to understate it. I think it's appropriate for some sort of medium density regional housing opportunity to go in here, but that's not what we're going to put here. It's going to be a very high-density project. I want to thank F Cubed for stepping forward here and speaking up. Frankly, the position that F Cubed took surprised me, but it also spoke loudly to me and echoed all of my similar concerns that I've had from the beginning. This isn't good wildlife habitat. It's not a healthy wildlife corridor. This is a perfect opportunity for infill. And I am grateful that the applicant was receptive to my idea of putting pickleball courts on the power line easement. I think that's going to be a nice feature for the neighborhood to take advantage of. And in particular, I'm very grateful for the affordable units that would be going up on this property. It's needed, and I understand why others on this council are supporting the project because of its inclusion. But I very much take umbrage with the idea that this is a NIMBY issue. This is not about being supportive of affordable housing. It's not. This is about what's appropriate for the space and also what's consistent with the regional plan as it now exists. And medium density housing is appropriate here, but that's not what it's going to end up going up here. And that's really unfortunate. You know, ultimately, the way I see it, the property owners are selling the land, but demanding to maintain some sort of private control of portions of it. And I did not hear that notion shot down to my satisfaction when the representative for the developer had a chance to speak. You know, the developer has admitted that they're getting this on a technicality. So I won't support this unless they agree to only go with 9 acres and drop 23 units for a new total of 170 units, 137 units on this parcel. Otherwise, there's still the methodology of going for a regional plan amendment, and I would support that process going forward, although it would entail comments and opinions from all sides and would be a lengthy process. I think that is the proper way for us to go forward on an issue which so clearly has fuzzy math at the center of it.
Thank you, Councilmember Aslan. Vice Mayor.
Thank you so much, and thank you to Councilmember Shimoni for your articulate argument for affordable housing. I share your concerns. I know that this is an urgent problem in our community that is preventing us from being as good as we can be, because we need more housing. I'm not opposed to the use. I am not opposed to an apartment building being built there. I think that's very appropriate. I am not opposed to the density necessarily. And as has been stated, we have a deficit of 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom rental apartments. I also believe that I support clustered development. I support leaving areas of open space, but the kicker here is that open space needs to be available to the residents of the development. This is where I'm getting stuck on this project, is that it is fenced off from residents of the development. I also believe that estate residential, which is what it is currently zoned, does not serve our community, and I would not want to see one house per 5 acres developed there. And this all comes down, I've got the realization that we have an affordable housing emergency on one hand, with this proposal conflicting with how we've decided as a community to make our land use decisions. And that's a hurdle that I'm having a really difficult time overcoming. And so I'd like to echo what Councilmember Aslan said, that lowering your density to what would be required or what would be allowed there without the 2 acres, so using 9 acres would be very acceptable to me, or applying for a major plan amendment. And if you're successful, then perhaps you can have a higher density there than is currently allowed. And this is such a difficult decision for me. And if there were any other way to support this project, if that 2 acres wasn't hanging out there, I would like to support this project. But as it stands, I can't at the current density.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Salas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just looking at my notes here. Okay. First, I need to emphasize that I strongly support our council's goals in increasing housing availability and affordability, as well as pursuing sustainability. And I think every staff member who worked so hard in the last couple of years or so with the developer to come up with a more palatable draft development agreement. From the April meeting, I have come across a couple of dilemmas. And I think these dilemmas are shared by some of the members of the community who spoke with us today and also wrote to us, and some members on council. There exists a strong property rights dilemma, as this development is entangled with 2 acres of homestead on the north side of High Country Trail. The property owner is selling the property to the developer, but will be maintaining control of the 2 acres of the homestead. And I am very much aware of Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation, as well as staff recommendation. There also seems to be a gray area when it comes to transfer of development rights by joining the 2 parcels and in calculating density. And that is clear to me that there's an effort in bending the zoning code. And it is a gray area. But there's a reason why we have a zoning code. And it is my sworn duty to abide, comply, and enforce our zoning code. Another dilemma that I have been processing is the undelivered promise. At the last meeting, I was so enthusiastic in seeing this property, this development come into fruition, with the promise of opening 1.45 acres of the homestead to public access. And that is where the resource protection overlay is located. However, that promise is not delivered in the development agreement. I intend to see the project come into fruition the right way. So if I could offer an unsolicited advice to the developer, because I remember in the April meeting that 160 units is your breaking point to move this project forward. So if the developer is so inclined to pursue 160 units or more, I encourage you to go back to the drawing board, let go of the 2 acres of the homestead, and disentangle from the cumbersome conditions set forth by the property owner. I further encourage the developer to submit a regional plan amendment to pave the way for high-density residential zone on 9 acres south of High Country Trail. And that is adjacent to the lodge. And for full disclosure, I live at the lodge for 4 years and I love that community. So going through that process will allow the developer to build up to 198 units on 9 acres if a regional plan amendment is successful. So those are my 2 unsolicited advice. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Salas. Councilmember Sweet.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you everyone for the discussion tonight. I am very supportive of affordable housing and sustainability. I support many aspects of this development and would like to see housing on this parcel, and I believe in infill. And I do believe that in the right circumstances, this would be a very appropriate place for this type of project. However, at this point, this project is not falling within the regional plan. So I would like to either see this go through the process for a regional plan amendment and involve our community in that discussion, or I would like to see the built 9 acres, the buildings on the 9 acres that would be allowed. And thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Sweet. Councilmember McCarthy has a comment, and then I'd like to comment before you make a motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Did you want to take Adam Shimoni's comment first before I make a motion?
Sure. Councilmember Shimoni has a question for the developer. Councilmember Shimoni, if you could make it short, though I think we're pretty, consensus has already been built, it seems like here. Yep. So.
I am hearing that from all of you on council. So my question for the developer is, what is your response to the conversation you've heard by the majority of council before we address a motion or vote up or vote down this project? I'm just curious if the developer has any last minute ideas or Hail Mary options that make this project a success for us all.
Mayor, Councilmember Shimoni, I appreciate the question, and I wish I did have a Hail Mary. I can tell you, as it stands today, there is no access to the property on the north side of High Country Trail. And if in fact this property was approved and this proposal was approved, there would be no access, but there would be $7 million worth of public benefits between all of the items that I've listed that you're all well aware of. I won't belabor the point, but I can tell you if it's denied, there will also be no access, but there will be no corresponding public benefit. And it's beyond frustrating at this stage to hear any inkling, frankly, that we're not playing by the rules. There is nothing that this applicant is doing that is not in accordance with your plan, with your zoning code, with your entire ordinance. Yet it's been suggested that after 3 years, now we go back and revisit the regional plan, which is just unfortunately unavailable to us at this stage. So the entire project will go away because we started at 197 units and we're now at 160 units and cannot build a project at fewer than 160 units. And I appreciate the work that those of you on the council have attempted to make this a reality. But I can tell you, as it stands today, there is no alternative for us. We have done everything we possibly can and more, and have exceeded so many of your standards. So to find out that all of that is for naught is beyond frustrating. And I think a loss not only to the developer, but also, frankly, to the city.
Okay, thank you. And I really personally appreciate your efforts in our community, and I apologize that this does not seem like it's moving forward. I too am extremely disappointed. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Shimoni and Mr. Morris. Councilmember McCarthy.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I would like to make a brief comment, then make a motion, and then make another brief comment. I found that the comments of F Cubed were interesting. They pointed out that the developer is planning to use the 2 acres north of the road for their allowable density calculations. That is very clear. It does seem to me, to use an analogy, that they're trying to bake a cake, but it's an incomplete cake. And I really do appreciate the community benefits. We'll call those icing on the cake, but still it's an incomplete cake. But I do have a suggestion, and I think it's a reasonable suggestion. And I sincerely hope that all parties will accept a reasonable solution. So, considering the critical need for 1 and 2 bedroom apartments in Flagstaff, I hereby move to approve Ordinance 2021-06 to amend the zoning map to rezone the subject parcel to medium density residential with the 6 conditions listed in the staff report, and with the added requirement that the number of apartments be limited to no more than 137 units. The number of required, and I'm still in the motion here, the number of required formerly affordable housing units shall be reduced proportionally while maintaining the 20% allocation. The number of automobile parking spaces may be reduced in accordance with City Code to reflect the change from 160 down to 137 dwelling units. That's my motion. A comment I'd like to make is that what I would suggest is that we pass that motion tonight. The developer may say, we can't do that. Well, I would ask the developer to say, sharpen your pencils. And also, it may be some of those icings on the cake are available for negotiation. Maybe we give in on a few of the icings on the cake to get the basic project. So that's my motion. And hopefully I can get a second on it so that we can at least have a discussion about my idea. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember McCarthy. Well, with that motion's on the table, I do want to give my comments here.
I will second that, Mayor. I will second the motion.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Salas. Well, I have to say is very similar to what others have stated thus far. We do have a zoning code, but also we have a planning and zoning commission that voted this down. It's not just about why have a code if we're not going to uphold it. It's about why have a planning and zoning commission if we aren't going to listen to their assessment of the situation as well. This is a very unprecedented situation, but I don't want it to become the precedent that we are effectively approving high density residential and a medium density rezoning. And with that, I won't belabor us too much. I just think that this is inconsistent with our regional plan and would echo many of the other individuals who have stated their stance on that and how to approach the situation. With that, we do have a motion in place by Councilmember McCarthy and seconded by Councilmember Salas. Councilmember McCarthy, you have a comment.
I just want to comment that my motion is consistent with the zoning code very clearly and is consistent with the regional plan. So I'm going to vote yes on my motion.
Gotcha. Councilmember Shimoni?
Thank you, Mayor. I am in favor of this motion, assuming the developer is. And I know we said that we're just going to push it back on the developer. If the developer isn't in favor of this motion and says this is a non-starter, I'm personally not in favor, but I don't know. I don't know if the developer wants to comment on this, but it's hard for me to vote on this not knowing what the developer is thinking is possible.
Yeah, we are past the point of including their commentary at this point. Okay. So we're in motion here. So there is a motion in place.
I do have a question.
Yes, Councilmember Aslan.
Thank you. Sorry for the interruption. Would this motion, this might be something that Alex can answer, or if legal needs to get involved, so be it. But my question is, if this motion moves forward, does that's not just about this one specific developer. This would leave this parcel of land open for any developer, correct? Potentially. Do you understand my question? I mean,
this is Sterling. I'm not sure.
About,
sorry, go ahead, Alex.
Auza LLC. This could be applicable to anybody who would like to develop here.
This rezone? Oh, I see. That if a different applicant came in.
The motion.
Yes, I would think a different developer could come in and develop to these standards, these conditions of the zoning.
That was my understanding too. I just wanted to make sure that was clear to all of council.
I think perhaps legal should confirm that.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, please.
This is Sterling. I was going to comment. Christina Rubalcaba is on the line. Christina, if you want to jump in, great. If not, I will.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. Thanks, Sterling. Christina Rubalcaba, Senior Assistant City Attorney. Yeah, so the development agreement, if approved, and the rezoning will run with the land. So any other developer in the future, if this developer decides to withdraw from whatever agreement they have with the property owner, could develop according to the site plan and according to all of the conditions of the ordinance. That is correct. But going back, just one more comment, going back to Councilmember McCarthy's point, if council were to do the first read, anything that was going to be renegotiated, I think it was referred to as the icing, that would really need to happen before the second read because those conditions are currently found in the DA and they're required to be complied with.
Thank you, Ms. Rubalcaba. Ms. Salzberg, you wrote in the chat box. If you could say that out loud, just so we're all aware, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to make a quick clarification on Councilmember McCarthy's motion. This would be a motion to read the ordinance for the first time with the amendments you listed.
And I
correct,
absolutely
Stacey,
agree
and
with that.
thanks, Jim. Sorry, Sterling here. Correct, and that's why Christina's advice was about possible negotiations between the first and the second read. This would only be for the first read.
I agree with all of that. And the developer may not know how he thinks about it tonight, but he may get to think about it for a few days and then come back.
Thank you, Councilmember McCarthy. I'm a little concerned with Councilmember Aslan. I appreciate you bringing up that point that if they withdraw now, we have rezoned that someone else can bring up, and then we may lose some potential negotiating power over whatever else we may want to see here. So will not be in favor of the motion on the table currently. So with that being said, though, I'll open it up for further discussion before we go to a roll call vote.
I have another question.
Oh, go for it.
Sorry, trying to write Q. Mr. McCarthy, I was wondering if you did the math on the proportionality of affordable housing units at the new threshold that you mentioned. How many units would that be compared to what it was before? Just curious. I could also do the math.
Actually, I haven't run the math on that, but it's 20%.
Looks like Alex can.
So it'd be 20% of 137.
Well, yeah.
So that'd be like 27 or 28, depending on how we round up or down.
Ms. Pucciarelli, could you confirm for us, please?
It's actually based on the base density. So the 137 includes bonus density units. So the base density is actually 81. So that would result in 16 affordable units.
Thank you.
And Vice Mayor has before we go to Vice Mayor, question, City Attorney, you have a comment?
No, my apologies. I was talking to the wall there. Just a quick clarification on your statement, Mayor. The rezone would not be in effect unless and until there's a second read. I know you mentioned you're not in favor of a first read tonight, but there is a second read required for that rezone for the ordinance to become effective. Just wanted to point that out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, City Attorney. Vice Mayor, have a question?
Yes, although I'm going to withdraw it based on Mr. Solomon's clarification.
All right, thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Aslan, would you like to state what
Sure.
you stated
Well,
there? So,
I would like, I don't know exactly procedurally how to do this, but if we're going to vote on this amendment, I would like it to further include a stipulation that the units are electric. If there's a potentiality of losing some of our negotiating power here, I don't see why we can't keep going with our bullet points on what needs to be included on the site if it were to be developed.
thank you, Councilmember. City Attorney or Ms. Rubalcaba, whoever would like to jump in here.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick answer to Councilmember Aslan's question. That would just require an amendment to the motion. If that answers your question. If not, let me know.
Yeah. Ms. Rubalcaba?
Yeah, and just to add on to what Sterling said, I believe the requirement you're referring to, Councilmember Aslan, is already in the development agreement. It would be that alternative sustainability provision for the all-electric units, and that would require, of course, council to pass a zoning code amendment later on. But because that's already included in the development agreement, and whatever is approved by council is a package, it's the rezoning ordinance together with the development agreement, and they both refer to each other. So that is what runs with the land. So any subsequent developer that would want to develop would have to comply with all of those provisions as well, because they are in the development agreement. So that, unless I'm misunderstanding what you're looking for, that provision is already in the development agreement and would apply to this developer if they get the rezone, or if you approve the rezone and another developer comes in later on, it would apply to that developer as well.
Hey, Ms. Rubalcaba, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Councilmember Aslan, but you meant for all electric, not just to the units, but to the common areas and the pool, et cetera, that was taken back with the amended development agreement.
Well, we get into that interesting scenario about the I'm trying to go through my notes here and think at the same time. It's not working. I am satisfied what Ms. Rubalcava said. So,
okay.
I'm not even sure I need to make an amendment to the motion, do I? Based off of her.
No, I don't think one is necessary.
Okay.
No, it's not. That's correct.
All right. Do we have any further comments or questions from council before we move on to roll call? All right, I'm not seeing anything else in the chat box, so we do have a motion on the table by Councilmember McCarthy, seconded by Councilmember Salas. Any further discussion? And Ms. Salzberg or Ms. Fobar, if you could take us down the list for roll call.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. Vice Mayor Daggett?
Aye.
Councilmember Sweet?
Aye.
Councilmember McCarthy?
Aye.
Councilmember Shimoni?
Aye.
Councilmember Aslan?
Aye.
Councilmember Salas?
Aye.
Mayor DC?
Nay. All right. That motion does carry. City Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Flagstaff amending the Flagstaff zoning map to rezone approximately 11 acres of real property located at 151 West High Country Trail, APN 112-05-001W and 112-05-011 from the estate residential ER zone to the medium density residential MR zone with conditions, providing for severability, authority for clerical corrections, and establishing an effective date as amended.
All right, thank you, City Clerk. This brings us down to agenda item 11A. This is the consideration and possible direction options for a petition to address intentional noise pollution.